But I do wonder whether, for example, if I use the example of my own local, it only stays open late on a Friday and Saturday. Do we actually need to get to the same hours 7 days a week? Or is there actually the opportunity to say, perhaps what we should be doing is having at set hours, say Sunday to Thursday, and different hours on Friday to Saturday, when the nighttime economy is perhaps at its more...
Perhaps he would try to pursue with the deputy leader of the borough council, which he is a member, that it is actually helpful to argue in the manner in which he's argued, rather than go on the radio and make outright opposition to any possibility of agreeing to anything. That is not helpful. Good relations between this council and the borough council, particularly as he is supposed to be in the same political party as me. Now, to deal with Councillor Blackley's points, lights which do not belong to the county council are out with this arrangement. Of course, I mean we can't dictate what. There are a few lights, I think, owned by districts and boroughs. They're mainly parishes that own lights for amenity purposes. I'm actually sympathetic with helping the parishes if I can. And I know our officers have been as helpful as possible to supply them with the switch-off devices if they want it. But we are not imposing, we cannot impose on lights that we don't own. And that actually raises the underlying reasoning for street lights in the first place. Is actually to do with safety. It is actually to do with road safety, pedestrian safety, cycling safety, and if it is amenity lighting, it should be provided actually by the district council or as proxy for the parish or town council, or under the Local Government Act, it should be provided by the parish or town council. And you know, that is the line of demarcation. So in judging these issues, we should be concerned largely about safety. And that's why some of the exemptions are inevitably about to do with roundabouts and junctions and things like that, because that's associated with safety. And why some of the exemptions are nighttime economy centres of cities, because that's about pedestrian safety. So our primary concern is about safety. And that is what we clearly want to drive our exemptions policy. I mean, on the nighttime economy, I think all places have a nighttime economy of, you know, in different strengths. And if Councillor Buckley does look at the exception criteria, it clearly provides for evidence where people are congregating after midnight, there will be exception. Again, I would answer his question in the same way as Councillor Pond. If he can just bear with us while we roll out the entire programme on the 12 till 5 mechanism, that's not being as rigid as Hertfordshire, but it's trying to get consistency across the county. I think there is an opportunity to flex this in the future. Now, as far as the licensed premises are concerned, I would actually assert to Councillor Buckley that, and I would have to, as a cabinet member for Ireland, say that nobody should drink and drive under any circumstances. And I would suspect that if someone was in a licensed establishment at midnight, they would have had more than enough drink to justify that they should never drive after that. So I think the answer to that question is, I don't think it would occur, but anyone who is, whether it be on a Friday night, a Saturday night, or in the middle of the week, anyone who is drinking after midnight, I would strongly advise to leave their car at home and take a torch.
Possibly not until lunchtime. Said there is room for a more flexible and imaginative approach. Clearly, communication and publicity could have been much better. As I think Councillor Robinson said, the last 4 years was a missed opportunity to warn people of what was coming. I think two areas, within the policy framework and looking to the future. So within the policy decision that's been taken, when obviously actual crime figures will emerge over time, and we may or may not see any changes. that would be a matter of fact. But even if they've shown no significant increase, it has been mentioned here, fear of crime is an issue to consider, and Councillor Buckley and others have talked about possible changes in behaviour that will result from a fear of crime. Whether officers or Councillor Bass think fear of crime may be irrational, but it's still there, it's definitely there. The consultation, as I said, has been insufficiently publicised, and some legitimate representations have just not found their way into the system. Perhaps that was perhaps they weren't ignored, perhaps they just didn't find their way into the system. And that's something which needs to be addressed. Councillor Bond talked about that. I do think that there ought to be more consideration given to the idea of safer routes from town centres to suburban neighbourhoods, so that in the policy it says remote paths, and I think that needs to be interpreted a little more generously. Representations were made by different councillors from the Chelmsford area about particular areas where this was appropriate, so that people would only be walking in the dark for the last few hundred yards rather than a mile or so. I've been surprised to hear from people of all ages, and men and women, who are out and about for other reasons other than partying the night away. Care assistants, people who visit elderly people to put them to bed and are on their way home after midnight. One resident who is a carer for her mother, and after she's put her mother to bed, then she goes to Tesco after midnight because she doesn't have any other time during the day. There's an old people's home where there is a lamppost outside the front door, and when ambulances arrive, as they often do during the night, the ambulance people have found it helpful for the lamp to be on, so that they can see to get the stretcher out the back and in through the front door of the old people's home, and that lamppost is no longer lit. Suggestions that maybe lamps should be left on, and again we've got the flexibility to do that, so maybe they should be left on where there are major roadworks underway, like in Moulton Lodge at the moment, where Moulton Lodge has been dug up for the last couple of months. Someone said maybe the lamppost should be left on where the potholes are, but that would mean leaving most of the lamps on. Other things which I guess it's something people just need to get used to, but it's nevertheless a concern. I mean, the AA comments that in the car, drivers' reactions tend to be slower and stopping distances longer. There was one resident of my division who turned the corner and stopped just in time to avoid hitting a Tesco trolley which had been turned upside down and left on the corner of the road, and another cyclist who had his lights on and a black wheelie bin had been left in the road, and narrowly avoided crashing into that. Now those are, I guess, things that people just got to get used to and take more care if this policy is being pursued. But again, it comes down to publicity. And in the town centre areas where people park, they don't park outside their houses because there's a lot of cars and they often have to park a long way from their houses. And so again, if they're coming home after midnight, they may have some distance to walk, and one person tripped and fell and has got quite a badly bruised face from having done exactly that. So I hope the Cabinet member will take more steps to reassure the public and consider those representations within the existing policy. Councillor Buckley talked about flexible weekends, perhaps that should be considered. I mean, someone suggested to me that actually, if it's a full moon, you can actually turn more lights off. And that maybe, because people can see better. So, there are, some people have been trying to come up with other suggestions within the existing policy. Other people have mentioned that the council should show, or both tiers of council should show that more lights should be off in the offices at night time. The council is doing it about the life of lights, 10 times as long, potentially for LED lights, less electricity. The fact that actually, because it's a better light, you actually need fewer lamp columns. You might be able to halve the number of lamp columns you had in any area, and that would save some money. So perhaps a phased approach to LEDs could be looked at. Maybe the place to start would be with the lamps that you're leaving on, because the saving there would be much greater. Maybe on new estates.
Both to me
at a meeting, exactly the same points raised in front of the chairman. I can tell the rest of this committee exactly the same points were made and were refuted by me then, and a suggestion that perhaps we should air this more generally within the committee. As a consequence of which, Councillor Robinson very sensibly withdrew his calling. I mean, I actually said already in this meeting that I wanted to experiment with LED. But this is not a proven technology, so let me repeat it. We are actually already experimenting with it. We're experimenting with it at the moment as one form of it in Harlow. We will look at other iterations of this. The technology is still changing, and we are trying to keep up with all of those changes. But I suspect, as I said before, that we will be unlikely to be able to afford, in one hit, the £31 million which at the moment it would take to actually roll this out across the county. And I suspect that if I put in a bid for that into the council's budget, it would get pretty short shrift. So let's be realistic and repeat that we are willing to look at individual flexibilities, but after the main rollout has actually taken place. Now, Councillor Robinson said he agrees with the policy objectives. Well, he's got a funny way of showing it, because we have our meeting with this call-in, and he goes away and he then campaigns against the principle and the speed and everything else to do with the rollout of this. So, you know, I'm afraid that, like his party, it's ambivalent on everything. It wants to run with the hare and hunt with the hounds. On this, the only practical basis for us to go forward to achieve a sensible saving in energy, a sensible saving in emissions, and a sensible saving in money is to try to convince the public that actually it's quite a good idea to switch off the lights at night. Now that is a difficult task. Very roughly, about 30% of the public are nervous, unhappy, have a fear of crime, and other intangible things or tangible things, including real needs to go out in the middle of the night and all that sort of stuff. And about 70% of the population are for this arrangement. That's what we had before, it's what we've had actually all the way through. Now you have to take a position on this, and my position that I'm taking, and that of this council, following extensive work that was done in the previous council, is to say, yes, we do need to roll this out, but we need to roll it out with a high degree of sensitivity, and that is what we are trying to do. Councillor Robinson secondly made the point that we should have better communications. Well, I don't think I could have been clearer that my intention, and I've given target times to roll this out. We extensively discussed this with Chelmsford and Braintree. Those discussions went on for ages. In fact, I think Chelmsford and Braintree councils almost got fed up with it. They said, for goodness sake, get on with it. Because you're trying to get this absolutely right. And I do accept it's slightly imperfect. But what I'd like to convince you, it is the right way to go. It is following others, yes, but having led the others from the start. And I want to see Essex in that position. I do acknowledge, Councillor Robinson, and you shouldn't say that I do not have and understand that some people have a fear of crime. Of course they do. I live in a very rural area which has no street lights whatsoever. And yes, people are concerned about going out at night. They are. Over great tracts of the rural parts of the community, that is the case. But they actually do adjust their lifestyle slightly to allow for the fact that the place is in darkness. Now, I understand the position of those who must be about between the hours of midnight and 5. And if they must be about, and there are areas where they congregate in sufficient numbers, that should be a case for exemption from the switch off. But those who are doing it on a nice-to-have basis, like going into a pub and drinking, you know, really, I know it's part of the nighttime economy, but they really should make provision for and understand that that is at their discretion, and that about the quote, you know, from the email that I had. The question is how many people are actually in that position, and what is the vast majority doing between midnight and 5. So, you know, I'm sorry, but that is the position. And I can't do much about the fear of crime argument, except to try to reassure people that if there was, as a consequence of this, and we have a regular dialogue with Essex Police, and Essex Police, who were highly sceptical of this at the outset, now are much more supportive. You know, maybe it's because actually they're in a quite strong position if they're going around at night, as they know in the rural areas, because they've got the lights and others haven't, maybe. You know, this has a counterbalancing effect. It does change the way in which people will operate. People, he is quite right, or someone else is quite right, will put up on their front doors devices that the minute there's movement, the light comes on for a couple of minutes. We all have them in the rural areas. So I say to the town dwellers, grow up. That's exactly what we do. And in fact, that is at the expense of the owner, but it often serves as a broader facility for people to see and get about. I take the point about whether specific representations, I mean, if the representation is so local and so single point like it might have got not addressed. But generally, we have tried to show in the CMA the representations that we did receive and how we disposed of them. And that was what he called in, and he saw that. Councillor Robinson saw it because he was looking at it when he spoke. And finally, well, he makes a joke about why don't we turn them off where the... Well, actually, that's a very good idea, because do you know that 96% of the road network has no potholes? Therefore, if you want me to turn it off where there are no potholes, I will be turning off many more lights, much higher percentage of lights, than I am actually disposed to do. It's worth saying that only 4% of the primary network is defective. And he concluded by saying, I think that paths should be lit. I think. With due respect to him, I did say it's evidence-based, this. It's not what people's opinions are. And I respect Councillor Robinson for his opinion, but what is going to govern the exemptions is whether the facts bear out what the opinion is actually saying. And I did say that as well in my response. That might be an unseen hazard. I think actually it would be just as much a hazard, in all probability, whether the light was on or off, if it was not attended to as an emergency. But again, if Councillor Cllr had attended other sessions, we're going to publish the information so we can actually see what percentage of roads have got defects outstanding in the Brentwood, in this case the borough of Brentwood. And it will confirm broadly that on the primary route network is about 4% defect. It is higher, yes, in the estate roads, and it will be different district by district. And therefore, I suppose we might, if a road was, or pavement was so bad, that might be an added criteria to exempt it from the lighting switch-off. I mean, if evidence could be shown to me that a road was so bad a condition that people were likely to fall over, I would certainly look at that or fix the road. But I don't think, with due respect, there will be many locations where that would be the case. I mean, again, on LED lighting, let me repeat. Yes, Sheffield has 68,000 lights, and it got a PFI to completely comprehensively review its lighting. Well, we don't have that. So we're playing on a different ballgame. Essex, by the way, has 128,000 lamps. So it's far bigger than Sheffield, but there you go. But if Sheffield had had all those LEDs, I imagine that they are going to apply a policy of dimming them or saving energy on them. And in answer again to the question, we are experimenting with the technology. We do have an experiment at Harlow, I believe it is that right? At Harlow, we have an area where LED lights. We'll probably try different types of technology of LED, because there are different types. And I said again, I'd like to see this roll out, and then it will be an ongoing evaluation of different technologies, different implementations, possibly different trials. I'm not sure I want to use a single base to go out right across a district. I don't think that would necessarily be the right way to do it, but certainly, as I responded, I think it's first of all to Councillor Pond, I've done it 3 or 4 times now, we remain open to the idea of new technologies. I think that was it.
Yep, I think so too. Right, Terry.
One slight point if I may, Chairman. Just a clarification if I may, on something I think you said, but I just want clarification. Can I just say, if there were future developments of housing or commercial development or indeed any other influence where they could actually provide an evidence base, and I repeat, evidence base, that amendment to lighting may be required, that can be accommodated within the arrangements that exist at the moment?
Yes, the short answer to that question, Councillor is yes, and indeed, I think we probably have to go further than that, is that when we have learned from examining the differing standards that exist right across the county, we probably have to work up a new set of standards. And we have to also make clear that if the lighting is for amenity purposes, it's probably operated under some cooperative arrangement that the owners of the houses. That does happen in some cases. And that only where the lighting is really for safety purposes of the general public beyond the given new set of residences in question, would it be automatically adopted by the county council. I think that's a very good point and something we need to look at. But again, in the long term.
Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one quick point to make. I actually said a council came before this meeting that we'd spoken about, and that's correct. We need to set the filter provided. So I'm sure we're on our way. A couple of other things in terms of task and finish group. I think it would have to be very, very clear and tight brief if we're going to have one. I don't think that there's a sort of a tactic to defer the whole process. It would be a very good idea. If it were looking specifically at the effectiveness of this consultation, that's something that we could contemplate. But I think it has to have a very, very clear task to it. And then a question really to Councillor Bass. In terms of communicating successfully to our residents what the benefits are, I mean, I think to the vast majority of residents, the benefits are plain common sense. It's to do with both saving money and saving energy and benefiting the environment. I certainly know that the vast majority of my residents in residential areas think this is something which is blindingly obvious and needs to be done. I think there is a level of curiosity about quantifying those benefits, and if it were possible to actually lay out what the cost and benefits of implementing the policy have been and what we expect the future benefits to be, and I know that Rodney agrees with me entirely about holding ourselves to account in this way, to actually to know what we're expecting to save and see that we do it would be a very good idea. And I also think not just in terms of money, but perhaps more importantly in terms of CO2. And we can actually look at what we think the CO2 saving is going to be, and then monitor that they are that. That would be a very healthy thing in terms of winning some of the population without concerns over.
Well, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Hurst on virtually everything he said. I really don't think it helps. It's up to you and your committee, not me, but you can have a task and finish group right now until the cows come home. I think it would actually be better to have a task and finish group which reviews after the rollout the sort of things that Councillor Hurst has been articulated. Yeah, are we delivering the necessary savings? What has happened to crime statistics? You know, all of that sort of stuff. The CO2 emissions. I mean, the approximate savings we conservatively estimate at around about 1 million a year, 1.1 million a year. And we're getting about, for the switching of lights, because it's about 3.5, 4 million into the switching light, we're getting about a 4-year payback for that piece of investment. I mean, those are the broad round figures. And obviously, if electricity prices escalate, which they will, whether or not Mr. Miliband puts a temporary blip in it, they will go on escalating above inflation. That is what 5% above inflation is what everyone is estimating. So if you temporarily blip that, all that happens is it goes back up again, or they're put up before the barrier comes in. So I think on either hypothesis, you can say that the annual savings are going to rise, almost certainly. But that is a very legitimate area for examination by a task and finish group. So my suggestion, it's only a suggestion, is to get the hard evidence as we roll this right out, even if we've experimented with some LED, got some further LED technology and all of these other things that we've been talking about. And hopefully the public becomes more convinced that what we've done is actually okay. I hope that is the case, otherwise I wouldn't be embarking upon this difficult path. I think that is a very legitimate area for the task and finish group, and that would be my advice, but of course it doesn't fall to me, it falls to we lead by example. But it's not saying I am content. I never said I was content. That is a wrong expression. I said these are difficult decisions. And we would not be moving down this route if we were not concerned about the sheer waste of energy that is taking place, and that there is escalating energy costs. And yes, we do need to save money, because we are, believe it or not, in a serious period of austerity. So I just want to re-emphasise that. I'm not content. I recognise that this is difficult. I recognise, and I said, that about 70% of the people are in favour and about 30% are very much against. And some of those 30% do have a fear of crime, unquestionably. And what I can only say to ameliorate that, if I can get those words out, is we have to see what actually happens. And I actually suspect that when we implement, and the experience does tend to suggest that in other areas as well as Essex, that people initially do not like it, but become used to it. Now that, if you like, that is a change of habit, it's a change of perspective. I don't think in very urbanised areas there is necessarily evidence that it involves massive expense to fit lights and everything else. People, this issue about the fear of crime is something that we can either talk up or talk down, depending on how responsible a set of people that we are. And my belief is that a lot, not entirely all, because there are many people, particularly those who live alone, who clearly have a genuine fear, but some of this is due to the actions of members, yes, the media, yes, and I do think that we all need to shoulder responsibility for ensuring that we try to take some of the hype out of this and concentrate on the facts. That's the only point I wanted to make of my own, and I thank you for the ability